My name is Chelsea, and I am 34 years old living in Connecticut with my two beautiful children, Lily, who is 6, and Noah, who is 4. What started as occasional discomfort has grown into an unbearable family situation. Watching my parents shower my siblings' children with affection while barely acknowledging mine has created wounds deeper than I ever imagined. Last Christmas, seeing the hurt in my children's eyes finally pushed me to my breaking point. I had to take a stand. Before I share my story, let me know where you're watching from in the comments below. Please hit that like button and subscribe if you've ever felt the sting of family favoritism. I grew up in a quaint New England town with my older brother James and younger sister Amber. Our family was solidly middle class. My father Frank worked as an accountant, while my mother Margaret taught at the local elementary school. We never wanted for anything important, though. Luxuries were occasional treats rather than everyday expectations. Frank was always the more reserved parent. He showed his love through providing for us and teaching practical skills rather than verbal affirmations or physical affection. Margaret was more outwardly nurturing but had definite expectations about behavior and achievement. She prided herself on raising good children who reflected well on the family. As the middle child between 38-year-old James and 30-year-old Amber, I often felt caught between worlds. James was the responsible firstborn who set the standard for academic achievement. Amber was the baby of the family who could charm her way out of trouble with her quick wit and infectious laugh. I was the peacemaker, the one who worked hard, but never quite received the same recognition as my siblings. Our relationships growing up had the normal sibling rivalries and alliances. James and I bonded over our shared love of books and nature, spending hours exploring the woods behind our house. Amber and I had our secret sister codes and stayed up late talking about crushes and dreams. But there was always a subtle competition for our parents' attention and approval that created undercurrents of tension. I followed a pretty conventional path, graduating from the University of Connecticut with a degree in marketing. That's where I met David during junior year when we were paired for a group project. He was studying computer science and had this quiet confidence that immediately attracted me. We dated throughout college and married a year after graduation. My early career was promising. I worked my way up at a marketing firm in Hartford, eventually becoming a team leader. When I became pregnant with Lily, David and I had long discussions about our priorities. His career as a software engineer was taking off, and we made the joint decision that I would scale back to part-time work to be more present for our children during their early years. It was a choice I embraced, though sometimes I wonder if my parents saw it as me not living up to my potential. David is everything I could want in a partner. He's thoughtful and steady, the kind of man who remembers to bring home my favorite dessert after a hard day without being asked. His patience with our children is remarkable. He'll spend hours building elaborate block castles with Noah, or listening to Lily explain the intricate storylines of her artwork. We complement each other well. Where I can be anxious and overthinking, he brings calm rationality. When he gets too caught up in logical solutions, I remind him of the emotional nuances at play. Our children are the light of my life. Lily has a creative soul and extraordinary empathy for a 6-year-old. She notices when someone is sad and will draw them pictures to cheer them up. Her sensitivity makes her both deeply compassionate and easily wounded. Noah at 4 is all boundless energy and curiosity. He wants to understand how everything works and asks questions that sometimes leave us scrambling for answers. His enthusiasm for life is contagious, though his high energy can be exhausting. James married Sophia, a pediatric nurse, and they have 8-year-old identical twin boys, Lucas and Ethan. The twins are athletic and outgoing, already showing promise in youth soccer. Amber married Tyler, who works in finance, and they have a 5-year-old daughter named Harper. Harper is precocious and confident, taking after her mother in her ability to be the center of attention. Our extended family lives within an hour of each other, which means we gather frequently for holidays, birthdays, and occasional Sunday dinners. Growing up, family was always emphasized as the most important support system, the people who would always be there for you no matter what. My parents regularly talked about the importance of maintaining close family bonds, so I naturally expected these values would extend to their role as grandparents. When I first became a mother, I envisioned my parents embracing all their grandchildren equally. I pictured Margaret teaching Lily to bake using the same family recipes she taught me, and Frank taking Noah fishing, just as he had done with James and me. I imagined cousins growing up almost like siblings with the support of doting grandparents who showed no favoritism. The reality would prove painfully different. The first signs of unequal treatment were subtle enough that I questioned my own perception. When Lily was born, my parents seemed happy enough bringing a small gift and staying for a short visit. But just 6 months later, when James and Sophia had the twins, my parents were ecstatic. They visited the hospital, immediately arrived with elaborate gifts, and my mother took 2 weeks off work to help care for them. At first, I rationalized the difference. Twins are special, I told myself. They needed more help and attention. It's natural for them to be excited about their first grandsons. And Lily would always be their first grandchild. Surely that counted for something. But as the months passed, a pattern emerged that became harder to dismiss. When we would visit my parents' home, they had multiple framed photos of the twins prominently displayed, but only one small picture of Lily tucked on a side table. During family gatherings, my mother would hold and play with the twins for hours, while barely asking to hold Lily. "Margaret, would you like to hold Lily while I eat?" I asked during a Sunday dinner when Lily was about 9 months old. "Oh, I just got comfortable," she answered, though she had been sitting in the same spot for only a few minutes. Yet later, when Sophia needed a break, my mother immediately offered to take both twins. My father was less obvious but still showed clear preferences. He'd spend time building block towers with the twins, but would look at his watch when Lily wanted to show him a toy. The differences were small enough that pointing them out would sound petty, but consistent enough that they formed an unmistakable pattern. When I became pregnant with Noah, I hoped things might change. Perhaps they would be more excited about another grandchild now that the novelty had worn off. I was wrong. They seemed almost inconvenienced by the news, offering a perfunctory, "That's nice, dear," before quickly changing the subject to James's recent promotion. Noah's birth brought more of the same. A brief hospital visit, a generic blue outfit as a gift, and minimal offers to help as I recovered from a difficult delivery that had resulted in an emergency C-section. Meanwhile, when Amber announced her pregnancy a few months later, my parents threw her an elaborate baby shower, something they had never done for me. "It's because Harper will be their first granddaughter," David suggested, trying to help me make sense of the disparity. I clung to this explanation, wanting to believe there was some logic behind their behavior, rather than facing the possibility that they simply valued my siblings' children more than mine. The pattern of forgotten milestones became impossible to ignore. My parents missed Lily's preschool graduation because it conflicted with one of the twins' soccer games, though the graduation had been on the calendar for months. They forgot Noah's birthday entirely one year, calling 3 days later with a hasty excuse about their calendar app malfunctioning. Yet they never seemed to miss any important event for my siblings' children. "Mom, Noah was really looking forward to his birthday call from you and Dad," I said when she finally called. "Oh, Chelsea, you know how busy things get. We can't keep track of everything," she replied dismissively. "Besides, he's only 3. It's not like he'll remember." But he did remember. He asked repeatedly why Grandma and Grandpa didn't call him like they called Cousin Harper on her birthday. The confusion in his eyes as he tried to understand why his grandparents didn't seem to care about his special day broke my heart. David noticed the disparities from the beginning, but tried to shield me from additional pain by downplaying his observations. Eventually, though, the evidence became too glaring to minimize. "I don't want to upset you, but did you notice your mom spent the entire Easter gathering helping the twins hunt for eggs while completely ignoring Lily's requests for help?" he asked gently, after one particularly difficult family gathering. And when Noah showed her the egg, he found she barely looked at it before turning back to help Ethan. I had noticed. I'd been noticing for years, but had been making excuses and trying to compensate by making my children feel extra special when we were home. I would throw elaborate themed birthday parties, create special mother-child dates, and ensure both Lily and Noah knew how deeply they were loved and valued. But it wasn't enough to erase the hurt of being treated as less than their cousins by their own grandparents. Family gatherings became increasingly tense as I found myself hyper-aware of every interaction between my parents and the various grandchildren. I started keeping mental tallies of how many times my mother praised Lucas and Ethan, compared to the complete absence of recognition for Lily and Noah's achievements. I noticed how my father would bring small surprises for Harper, but come empty-handed for my children. The weight of it all began affecting my relationships with James and Amber, too. I found myself growing resentful when they would casually mention how my parents had taken the twins for a weekend trip, or bought Harper an expensive new dollhouse just because. They seemed oblivious to the disparity in treatment, or perhaps they simply didn't care as long as their children benefited. As the children grew older and more aware of their surroundings, the favoritism became impossible to hide or explain away. By the time Lily was 5 and Noah 3, they had developed enough social awareness to notice the differences in how they were treated compared to their cousins. This awareness brought questions I wasn't prepared to answer. "Mommy, why does Grandma always sit next to Harper and the twins at dinner but never next to me?" Lily asked after a family gathering where my mother had once again shown clear preference for my siblings' children. "Grandma loves you very much, sweetie. Sometimes adults get caught up talking to certain people, but it doesn't mean they love you any less." I lied, hating myself for making excuses for behavior that was inexcusable, yet not knowing how to explain the painful truth to my sensitive daughter. The questions became more frequent and more heartbreaking. After Lucas and Ethan had a joint birthday party, where my parents gifted them each new bicycles, Lily came to me with tears in her eyes. "Mommy, why did Grandma and Grandpa give the twins such big presents? They only gave me a coloring book for my birthday. Did I do something wrong?" Her question pierced me like a physical pain. How do you explain to a child that the people who should love them unconditionally have inexplicably decided they are less worthy of attention and affection? There is no answer that doesn't risk damaging their self-worth. "No, baby, you didn't do anything wrong," I assured her, pulling her into a tight hug. "Grandma and Grandpa just have different ways of showing love to different people. It doesn't mean they love you less." But I knew that wasn't true. The evidence was overwhelming that they did indeed love her less, or at least acted as if they did. And now my children were old enough to see it too. Noah's response to the favoritism was different but equally concerning, where Lily asked questions and expressed her hurt. Noah became increasingly withdrawn around my parents. He stopped trying to show them his toys or tell them about his preschool adventures. Instead, he would cling to David or me during family gatherings, his usual exuberance dimmed to a cautious quietness that broke my heart. The breaking point came when I overheard a conversation between my parents that they never intended me to hear. I had arrived early to a family dinner and was bringing a dessert to the kitchen when I heard them talking in the dining room. "Lucas is just so bright. James says his teacher thinks he might be gifted," my mother was saying proudly, "and Ethan is already reading at a second-grade level." "Harper, too," my father added. "Amber says she's been invited to join the advanced dance class even though she's younger than the other girls." There was a pause before my mother continued, her voice lowered but still audible. "I wish Chelsea would push Lily and Noah more. They seem so average compared to their cousins. Maybe if she hadn't cut back her work hours, she could afford to put them in better activities." I froze the dessert in my hands, suddenly feeling like a lead weight. The casual cruelty of their assessment stunned me. Not only were they actively favoring my siblings' children, but they were also blaming me and my parenting for their perception that my children were somehow lacking. I quietly backed away from the doorway, set the dessert on a hall table, and locked myself in the bathroom until I could compose myself. I never told David exactly what I'd heard. It was too painful to repeat. The financial disparities became apparent too. At a family dinner, my father proudly announced he had set up college funds for all the grandchildren. It sounded wonderful until I learned through James that the twins each had accounts with $5,000, and Harper had one with $4,000. When I inquired about Lily and Noah's accounts, my father looked uncomfortable. "We've started accounts for them too, of course," he said vaguely. Later investigation revealed they had deposited $500 each for my children, 1/10 of what they had given their other grandchildren. My relationship with my parents grew increasingly strained as I became more protective of my children. I started declining some family gatherings or keeping our visits shorter. I would position myself near Lily and Noah during interactions with my parents, ready to step in if they were being ignored or dismissed. David's frustration grew alongside mine. Always the more diplomatic one in our relationship, even he began losing patience with my parents' behavior. After one gathering, where the differences in treatment were particularly obvious, he confronted me in the car on the way home. "Chelsea, this isn't right. Your parents are damaging our children's self-esteem. We need to address this directly instead of tiptoeing around it." I knew he was right, but the thought of confronting my parents terrified me. What if it made things worse? What if they became defensive and doubled down on their behavior? What if it created a permanent rift in the family? I had been raised to believe that family harmony was paramount, that public confrontations were to be avoided at all costs. The idea of challenging my parents directly went against everything I had been taught. The stress began taking a physical toll. I developed insomnia, lying awake, rehearsing conversations I never had the courage to initiate. I lost weight as my appetite diminished with anxiety. Headaches became my constant companion. David worried about me, but I couldn't seem to find a path forward that didn't risk making everything worse. I tried subtle approaches first. I sent my parents photos and videos of Lily and Noah's accomplishments, hoping that more awareness of their personalities and achievements might help them connect. I positioned my children near them at gatherings and prompted conversations. "Dad, did you know Noah can count to 50? Now Noah, show Grandpa how you can count." These efforts met with limited success. My parents would make the appropriate noises of approval before turning their attention back to their favored grandchildren. The gap remained, and my children continued to notice and be hurt by it. I attempted to discuss the issue with James and Amber, hoping they might help bridge the divide, but they dismissed my concerns. James suggested I was being oversensitive. "Parents always have different relationships with different grandkids. It's normal," he said with a shrug. Amber was even less sympathetic. "Maybe if you didn't analyze every interaction looking for problems, you wouldn't find so many," she snapped when I carefully tried to bring up the disparity in birthday presents. I felt increasingly alone in my awareness of the situation, gaslighted by my own family, into questioning whether I was imagining or exaggerating the problem. But the evidence was too consistent to deny, and the hurt in my children's eyes too real to dismiss. The Christmas gathering at my parents' house last year became the catalyst for everything that followed. It was supposed to be a joyful celebration, but instead, it became the day I could no longer pretend that my children weren't being actively harmed by their grandparents' blatant favoritism. We arrived at my parents' colonial-style home, which was decorated with the same Christmas ornaments and lights that had adorned it throughout my childhood. The familiar scent of pine and cinnamon should have been comforting, but instead, my stomach knotted with apprehension. Previous holiday gatherings had shown me exactly what to expect, and I had almost suggested we skip this year. But David had encouraged me to give my family one more chance. "It's Christmas," he'd said. "Maybe things will be different this time." They weren't different. They were worse. The present opening portion of the evening made the disparities impossible to ignore. My parents had placed wrapped gifts under their large Douglas fir tree, and the children were excited to discover what their grandparents had chosen for them. As the grandchildren gathered around my mother, handed out presents with a beaming smile. Lucas and Ethan each received large, expensive-looking packages. When they tore off the wrapping paper, they revealed the latest gaming system they had been coveting, complete with 3 games each. Harper was next unwrapping an American Girl doll she had been asking for, along with multiple outfits and accessories. The 3 cousins were ecstatic, hugging my parents and thanking them profusely. Then came Lily and Noah's turns. My mother handed them each a small lightweight package. Inside, Lily found a generic coloring book and pack of crayons that looked like they might have been picked up as an afterthought from a drugstore. Noah received a small plastic dinosaur toy that was appropriate for a child half his age. The total value of their gifts couldn't have been more than $20 combined, compared to the hundreds spent on each of their cousins. The look on Lily's face as she watched Harper playing with her elaborate doll while clutching her coloring book is something I will never forget. She smiled politely and thanked her grandparents, but I saw her lower lip quiver slightly before she excused herself to go to the bathroom. I followed her and found her sitting on the closed toilet lid, silent tears streaming down her face. "The coloring book is nice, Mommy," she whispered when she saw me trying so hard to be brave. "I like coloring." I knelt beside her, my heart breaking. "I know you do, sweetie, and we'll get you some really special new art supplies when we get home, okay?" She nodded, but didn't seem comforted. "Does Grandma know I'm too old for that baby coloring book? Harper got a fancy doll and she's younger than me." I had no answer that wouldn't hurt her more. Noah handled the disappointment differently. He simply set his plastic dinosaur aside and went to sit quietly in a corner with a book he had brought from home. There was a resignation in his demeanor that was far more troubling than tears would have been. At 4 years old, he had already learned to expect disappointment from his grandparents. The gift disparity was just the beginning. Throughout the evening, my parents lavished attention on James's and Amber's children, while barely acknowledging mine. When Lucas described his recent soccer goal, my father clapped him on the shoulder with pride. When Lily tried to tell my mother about being chosen to lead the Pledge of Allegiance at school, my mother cut her off mid-sentence to help Harper adjust her new doll's outfit. During dinner, my mother had arranged the seating so that Lucas, Ethan, and Harper were clustered around her and my father, while Lily and Noah were placed at the far end of the table next to some distant relatives they barely knew. When I tried to rearrange the seating, my mother stopped me. "Chelsea, don't make a fuss. The arrangements are fine as they are," she said firmly, making it clear that any protest would be seen as disruptive. The most painful moment came after dinner, when relatives were sharing news and catching up. My mother proudly announced to everyone that Ethan had won his school spelling bee, Lucas had been selected for an advanced soccer team, and Harper had been featured in a local dance recital. "We are so blessed with such talented grandchildren," my mother concluded, not mentioning a single accomplishment of Lily or Noah, though Lily had recently received an award for her artwork at school, and Noah had finally conquered his fear of swimming. I noticed my children's faces fall as they realized they had been completely excluded from their grandmother's praise. David squeezed my hand under the table, his jaw tight with anger. I knew he was restraining himself from saying something for my sake. As the evening progressed, I overheard my mother talking to my aunt in what she thought was a private conversation. I had gone to the kitchen to help with dessert when I heard them speaking in lowered voices around the corner. "The twins and Harper are just so special," my mother was saying. "They have such personality and talent. Chelsea's two are sweet enough, I suppose, but they just aren't as special. Perhaps it's Chelsea's parenting. She's always been the least ambitious of my children." Something in me snapped. All the years of making excuses, of trying to shield my children, of maintaining family peace at the expense of Lily and Noah's emotional well-being, crashed down around me. I stepped into view, trembling with a rage I had never allowed myself to fully feel until that moment. "How dare you?" I said, my voice quiet but intense. "How dare you dismiss my children that way?" My mother looked startled, then defensive. "Chelsea, I was just having a private conversation. You're overreacting as usual." Overreacting. You've spent years treating Lily and Noah like they're less important, less worthy of love than their cousins. Do you have any idea what that does to a child? My voice had risen, and I realized other family members had begun to gather in the doorway watching the confrontation unfold. My father appeared looking uncomfortable. "Chelsea, this isn't the time or place. Let's all calm down and enjoy the holiday," he said, using the same tone he had always used when he wanted to sweep problems under the rug. "No, Dad, this is exactly the time and place because I'm not going to pretend anymore. I'm not going to watch you and Mom damage my children with your blatant favoritism." I was shaking now, years of suppressed hurt and anger flowing through me. The tiny presents, the forgotten birthdays, the constant praise for their cousins while ignoring their achievements. Do you think they don't notice? Do you think it doesn't hurt them? My mother's face hardened. "We treat all our grandchildren the same. If you're seeing differences, that's your problem, not ours." Her denial pushed me over the edge. That's a lie, and you know it. You spent hundreds on each of your other grandchildren for Christmas and got Lily and Noah items that together cost less than a nice dinner out. You can't even be bothered to remember what they like or what age they are. James stepped forward, then looking uncomfortable. Chelsea, maybe this isn't the best time. When is the best time, James? When my children are grown with self-esteem issues because their grandparents made it clear they weren't worth loving. When they stop trying to impress people because they learned early that their efforts don't matter. The room had gone silent. David had appeared with Lily and Noah, who looked frightened by the raised voices. The sight of their worried faces broke through my anger, replacing it with a bone-deep sadness. We're leaving, I said quietly to David. He nodded, already gathering our children's coats. My mother made one last attempt to regain control of the situation. You're being ridiculous, Chelsea. If you leave now, you'll ruin Christmas for everyone. I looked at her, really looked at her, and saw for the first time not the mother I had idealized and sought approval from my whole life, but a flawed, hurtful woman who had caused real damage to my children. Christmas is already ruined for Lily and Noah, I said softly. It has been for years. We left amid protests and confusion. The car ride home was filled with a heavy silence, broken only by Lily's occasional sniffles. Noah fell asleep emotionally exhausted. David drove carefully through the light snow that had begun to fall, reaching over occasionally to squeeze my hand in silent support. At home, after the children were in bed, I collapsed into David's arms and wept for everything that had happened and all the years I had allowed the situation to continue. In that moment of breakdown, I also found clarity. Things could not go on as they had been. For my children's sake, something had to change. In the days following the Christmas disaster, I fluctuated between doubt and determination. Had I overreacted? Had I permanently damaged family relationships? Then I would remember Lily's tears and Noah's quiet resignation, and know I had waited too long to act, not too little. I began researching family favoritism, looking for guidance on how to address the situation constructively. What I found validated my concerns. Studies showed that the negative effects of grandparent favoritism could be significant and long-lasting, affecting children's self-esteem, their ability to form healthy relationships, and even their sense of self-worth as adults. One article led me to Dr. Patricia Williams, a family therapist specializing in intergenerational relationship dynamics. I scheduled a consultation seeking professional guidance on how to proceed. What you're describing is unfortunately quite common, Dr. Williams explained during our first session, but that doesn't make it acceptable or harmless. Children are remarkably perceptive about emotional dynamics, and the message your children are receiving is that they are fundamentally less lovable or valuable than their cousins. Her validation of my concerns brought tears to my eyes. After years of having my perceptions dismissed by my family, hearing that my concerns were legitimate was powerfully affirming. What can I do? I asked. I've tried subtle approaches for years with no success. Based on what you've described, the time for subtle approaches has passed, she replied. Your parents have shown they either cannot or will not recognize the problem without direct confrontation. You need to be clear, specific, and set firm boundaries. Over several sessions, Dr. Williams helped me develop a strategy. She advised documenting specific instances of favoritism to counter gaslighting, preparing clear statements about the impact on my children, and establishing concrete expectations for change. Most importantly, she helped me understand that I needed to be prepared to limit contact if my parents were unwilling to acknowledge and address their behavior. David and I spent many late nights discussing our approach. He had always been supportive, but had deferred to my lead regarding my family. Now seeing how the situation was affecting not just the children, but me as well, he became more assertive in his opinions. I think we need to be prepared for the worst-case scenario, he said one night as we sat at our kitchen table after the children were asleep. Your parents might not accept responsibility or be willing to change. We need to decide what we'll do if that happens. It was a painful conversation, but a necessary one. Together, we agreed that while we wouldn't cut off contact entirely unless absolutely necessary, we would significantly reduce our children's exposure to my parents if they continued their harmful behavior. I spent weeks gathering evidence and preparing what I would say. I wrote down specific examples of disparate treatment, noting dates and details. I practiced responses to potential deflections or denials. I consulted with Dr. Williams about how to remain calm and focused if the conversation became heated. Finally, I called my parents and asked to meet with them alone, without the children or other family members present. They sounded wary, but agreed to have me over for coffee the following Saturday. I arrived at their house feeling simultaneously terrified and resolved. My hands trembled slightly as I rang the doorbell, but I reminded myself that I was advocating not for myself, but for my children, which gave me courage I might not otherwise have found. My mother greeted me with her usual kiss on the cheek, acting as though our Christmas confrontation had never happened. My father offered coffee and attempted small talk about the weather. I accepted the coffee, but gently steered the conversation to the purpose of my visit. Mom, Dad, I need to talk to you about something important, I began, my voice steadier than I expected. It's about how you interact with Lily and Noah compared to their cousins. And immediately, my mother's expression hardened. If you've come here to accuse us of not loving your children, you can leave right now. I won't listen to such nonsense. I took a deep breath. I'm not here to accuse you of not loving them. I'm here because your actions are hurting them, whether you intend to or not. I need you to understand the impact your behavior is having. What behavior? My father asked, seeming genuinely confused. We treat all our grandchildren the same. This was my opening to present the evidence I had so carefully compiled. I pulled out a small notebook where I had documented specific instances. Last Christmas, you spent approximately $300 each on Lucas, Ethan, and Harper. You spent less than $20 total on Lily and Noah, I stated calmly. At Thanksgiving, you asked Lucas, Ethan, and Harper about their activities and achievements, but didn't ask Lily or Noah a single question. When Lily tried to tell you about her art award, Mom, you changed the subject to Harper's dance recital. I continued listing examples, keeping my tone factual rather than accusatory. My parents listened with increasing discomfort. My mother's lips pressed into a thin line, my father looking down at his coffee cup. These aren't one-time occurrences, I concluded. They're part of a consistent pattern that has existed since Lily was born, and the children have noticed. Lily has asked me why you don't like her as much as her cousins. Noah has stopped even trying to get your attention because he expects to be ignored. My mother immediately became defensive. You're exaggerating everything, so what if we occasionally spend more on the others? The twins are older, and Harper is our only granddaughter. Lily is your granddaughter too, I pointed out. And the age difference doesn't explain consistently forgetting their birthdays or never asking about their interests or achievements. My father, who had been quiet, finally spoke. Chelsea, I think you're being oversensitive. All grandparents have different relationships with different grandchildren. It doesn't mean we love them any less. I had anticipated this response. It's not about having different relationships. It's about showing basic interest and affection. When was the last time either of you spent one-on-one time with Lily or Noah? When was the last time you called just to talk to them? You do these things regularly for their cousins. The conversation continued in circles for nearly an hour. My mother alternated between defensive anger and dismissive minimizing. My father tried to mediate while avoiding taking a clear position. I remained calm but firm, returning always to specific examples and the impact on my children. The breakthrough came unexpectedly. I described a recent incident where Lily had made a special card for their anniversary and had been heartbroken when they barely acknowledged it while effusively praising a phone call from Harper. She cried herself to sleep that night, I said, my voice finally breaking. She asked me what she had done wrong, why her cousins were better than her. She's 6 years old and already believes she's somehow defective because her own grandparents can't seem to show her the same love they show her cousins. Something in my father's expression changed. He looked genuinely troubled. She said that she thinks she's defective. I nodded, swallowing hard against the lump in my throat. Yes, and Noah has stopped talking about you altogether. When we mention coming to visit, he gets quiet and asks if he can stay home with David instead. My father looked at my mother, then back at me. I never meant to make them feel that way, he said quietly. I had no idea it was affecting them like that. My mother was less receptive. Children exaggerate. You're putting ideas in their heads by constantly looking for problems. I fixed her with a steady gaze. Mom, I've spent years making excuses for your behavior to protect my children's feelings. I've never said a negative word about you to them. They've formed these impressions entirely based on how you treat them compared to their cousins. There was a long silence. Then I laid out my expectations clearly. I need you both to understand that things cannot continue as they have been. I won't allow my children to be harmed by this dynamic anymore. If you want to have a relationship with them going forward, there need to be changes. I outlined specific requests, equal treatment in gifts and attention, regular one-on-one time with each grandchild, genuine interest in Lily and Noah's activities and achievements, no more comparing cousins or playing favorites. And I need you to understand that I'm serious about this being a condition of our continued relationship, I concluded. If you can't or won't make these changes, we will need to limit our contact to protect Lily and Noah's emotional well-being. My mother looked shocked. You would keep our grandchildren from us over something so petty. It's not petty to them, Mom. It's their sense of self-worth. And yes, I will do whatever is necessary to protect them, even if that means difficult decisions about family contact. We left things unresolved that day. My parents needed time to process what I had said, and I needed to give them space to do so. As I drove home, I felt both drained and oddly liberated. After years of silent suffering and accommodation, I had finally spoken my truth and stood firm in my children's defense. In the weeks that followed, I focused on creating a supportive environment for Lily and Noah. I reached out to our elderly neighbors, the Hendersons, who had always shown genuine interest in my children. They became surrogate grandparent figures, with Mr. Henderson teaching Noah about gardening, and Mrs. Henderson sharing her love of baking with Lily. I also began new family traditions to replace the often painful holiday gatherings with my extended family. We started a tradition of volunteering at a local animal shelter on Christmas morning before opening our own presents. We created Adventure Sundays, where we would explore a new park museum or nature trail as a family. Throughout this period, I maintained minimal contact with my parents, sending polite but brief responses to their occasional texts, but declining invitations to family gatherings. I wanted to give them time to reflect, while also demonstrating that I was serious about my boundaries. The extended family's reaction to my confrontation with my parents was mixed and complicated. My decision to take a stand created ripples that affected relationships well beyond just me and my parents. James called me a week after my meeting with our parents. His tone caught between concern and irritation. Mom's really upset, Chelsea. She says you accused her and Dad of being terrible grandparents. That's not what I said, I replied calmly. I pointed out specific patterns of behavior that are hurting my children and asked for more equitable treatment. James sighed heavily. Look, I understand you're feeling sensitive about this, but don't you think you're making a mountain out of a molehill? Parents and grandparents always have favorites. It's normal. It's not normal to consistently ignore or dismiss two of your grandchildren while lavishing attention and gifts on the others, I countered. And even if it were common, that doesn't make it okay or harmless. James seemed uncomfortable with my directness. I just think you're putting Mom and Dad in an impossible position. They're getting older. Do you really want your relationship with them to end like this? His attempt to place the burden of reconciliation entirely on me was frustrating, but not surprising. As the family peacekeeper, I had always been expected to smooth over conflicts and accommodate others' behavior, rather than address problems directly. I'm not ending the relationship, James. I'm setting boundaries about how my children are treated. There's a difference. We ended the call with an uneasy truce, James promising to think about what I had said, but clearly skeptical of my position. Amber's reaction was more openly hostile. She showed up at my house unannounced one afternoon, fortunately, when the children were at school. What is wrong with you? she demanded as soon as I opened the door. Mom is absolutely devastated. She cried for hours after your little attack. I invited her in despite her aggressive approach, determined to remain calm. It wasn't an attack, Amber. It was a necessary conversation about patterns of behavior that are hurting Lily and Noah. Amber rolled her eyes dramatically. Oh, please. Your kids are fine. You're just being oversensitive and dramatic as usual. Have you ever noticed how differently Mom and Dad treat your daughter compared to my children? I asked her directly. They adore Harper because she's outgoing and affectionate with them, she retorted. Maybe if your kids made more of an effort instead of always being so shy and withdrawn around them. I had to take a deep breath to maintain my composure. They're shy and withdrawn because they've learned that their grandparents aren't interested in them. Noah used to be extremely outgoing with them until he was repeatedly ignored, and blaming the children for adult behavior is exactly the problem. Amber and I parted on bad terms, with her accusing me of trying to force our parents to walk on eggshells around my overly sensitive children. Her dismissal hurt, but it also reinforced my conviction that I was doing the right thing by standing up for Lily and Noah. Not all the family reactions were negative, however. James's wife Sophia reached out privately with a very different message. She called me one evening when James was working late. I just wanted you to know that I understand why you did what you did, she said quietly. I've noticed the differences in how your parents treat the children too, but I didn't know how to bring it up. Her support meant more than she could know. Thank you, Sophia. That means a lot, especially when everyone else seems to think I'm overreacting. You're not, she assured me. The twins have mentioned it too, which makes me uncomfortable. Lucas asked me once why Grandma and Grandpa give them so many presents, but hardly anything to their cousins. Children notice these things. Sophia promised to talk to James about what she had observed, hoping to help him understand my perspective better. It was the first real ally I had found in the family, and it gave me hope that perhaps others might eventually come to understand my position as well. In the immediate aftermath of the confrontation, my relationship with my parents deteriorated further. My mother attempted to rally family members to her side, presenting herself as the victim of my unreasonable accusations. My father was less overtly antagonistic but remained largely passive, unwilling to challenge my mother's narrative or take concrete steps toward change. The first tentative sign of progress came about 3 months after our confrontation. My father called one evening, his voice hesitant. I've been thinking about what you said about Noah and Lily feeling less loved, he began awkwardly. I never intended for them to feel that way. It wasn't an apology, but it was an acknowledgement which felt like the first crack in a wall of denial. I know you didn't intend it, Dad, but intention and impact are different things. Would it be possible for me to see them sometime? He asked. Maybe take Noah fishing. You mentioned once he might enjoy that. The request surprised me. My father had never before shown interest in spending one-on-one time with either of my children. I think he would like that, I said cautiously. But I need to be sure this isn't a one-time effort that will leave him disappointed again. I want to try to do better, my father said simply. I can't promise I'll get everything right immediately, but I want to try. I arranged for my father to take Noah fishing the following weekend. I prepared Noah carefully, wanting him to enjoy the outing without placing too much pressure on the experience. To my relief, they returned with Noah chattering excitedly about the small sunfish he had caught, and my father looking more relaxed than I had seen him in years. My mother's path to recognition and change was longer and more complicated. Her first attempts at reconciliation felt performative and insincere, focused more on reestablishing family harmony than addressing the underlying issues. She sent generic gifts to Lily and Noah with cards that contained no personal messages. She called occasionally, but asked no specific questions about their lives or interests. During one such superficial call, I finally confronted her directly. Mom, these efforts feel like you're just going through the motions. If you want a relationship with Lily and Noah, you need to actually get to know them as individuals. I don't know what more you want from me, she said defensively. I'm trying. Trying would be asking Lily about her art projects or Noah about his dinosaur collection. Trying would be remembering that Lily loves purple, And Noah is obsessed with space. Trying would be treating them with the same enthusiasm and interest you show for Harper, Lucas, and Ethan. There was a long silence on the line. Then, to my surprise, my mother's voice returned with a different quality, a vulnerability I rarely heard from her. I don't know how to connect with them anymore. They seem so wary of me now. It was the first honest response she had given, and it opened the door to a more genuine conversation. They're cautious because they've been hurt. Building trust takes time and consistency, but if you're genuinely willing to try, I can help you. After 3 months of limited contact, I suggested a family therapy session with Dr. Williams. To my surprise, both my parents agreed to attend. The session was difficult but revelatory. Under Dr. Williams's skilled guidance, my mother reluctantly revealed something about her own childhood that shed light on her behavior. My parents always favored my sister, she admitted. Nothing I did was ever good enough. When I had children of my own, I promised myself I would love them all equally. And do you feel you've done that? Dr. Williams asked gently. My mother looked genuinely confused. Of course. I've always loved all my children. But we're talking about your grandchildren now, Dr. Williams pointed out. Is it possible that unconscious patterns from your own childhood are influencing your relationships with them? This suggestion visibly startled my mother. She had never considered that she might be recreating the very dynamics that had hurt her as a child. It wasn't an immediate transformation, but it was the beginning of awareness, which was the necessary first step toward change. The therapy session revealed complex generational patterns at work in our family. My mother had favored James as a child because he reminded her of the brother she had been compared unfavorably to by her own parents. She had favored Amber because, as the youngest, Amber had never posed the same kind of threat to her self-image that I had, as the middle child, who often questioned family dynamics. These patterns had extended to the grandchildren with my children, bearing the brunt of unconscious biases that had their roots in wounds inflicted long before they were born. Understanding these patterns didn't excuse the behavior, but it did help explain it and provide a pathway forward. As we left the session, I felt a mix of emotions: empathy for my mother's own childhood wounds, frustration that those wounds had been allowed to hurt a new generation, and cautious hope that awareness might lead to healing. I'm trying to understand Chelsea, my mother said as we walked to our cars. I'm not saying I've done everything right, but I am saying I want things to be better. It wasn't the full acknowledgement I had hoped for, but it was a start. It's been just over a year since that explosive Christmas and the confrontations that followed. Our family dynamics have shifted significantly, though the healing process remains ongoing and imperfect. My relationship with my parents has evolved into something I never expected. There is more honesty between us now, more willingness to acknowledge difficulties, rather than pretend everything is fine. It's not always comfortable, but it's more authentic than the superficial harmony we maintained for so many years. My father has made consistent efforts to connect with both Lily and Noah individually. The fishing trip with Noah became a monthly tradition that both of them look forward to. He discovered Lily's love of birds and bought her a child-friendly pair of binoculars, taking her to local nature preserves to spot different species. These genuine attempts to know my children as individuals have slowly rebuilt trust. My mother's journey has been more complex. She still struggles with old patterns, but makes visible efforts to correct herself when she falls into them. She created a special art corner in her home, where Lily can draw and paint during visits. She makes a point of asking both children specific questions about their interests and activities. She still occasionally shows unconscious preference for the other grandchildren, but now recognizes and addresses it when it happens, usually after a gentle prompt from my father or me. The most meaningful change came when my mother finally apologized directly to Lily and Noah. It happened during a small gathering at our home, a casual dinner, rather than a high-pressure holiday event. After dinner, she asked if she could speak to them privately. I was concerned, but allowed it staying within earshot in case I needed to intervene. "I haven't always been the best grandmother to you," I overheard her say. "Sometimes adults make mistakes, even grandmothers. I want you to know that you are both very special to me, and I'm going to do a better job of showing you that from now on." It wasn't perfect, but it was sincere. And when I peeked in, I saw Noah cautiously leaning against her side, while Lily asked if she could show her a new drawing. Small steps toward healing. The college funds were quietly equalized without fanfare or explanation. Birthday and Christmas gifts became more thoughtful and equitable. My parents began making efforts to attend school events and performances for all the grandchildren, equally keeping a shared calendar to ensure nothing was overlooked. My personal journey through this conflict has been transformative. Working with Dr. Williams helped me understand how my role as family peacekeeper had led me to tolerate harmful dynamics far too long. I learned to set boundaries without guilt and to advocate for my children, even when it created discomfort. Most importantly, I learned that family love should never require accepting harm to yourself or your children. David and I grew stronger through facing this adversity together. His unwavering support gave me courage when my resolve faltered. The way he protected our children while still encouraging reconciliation where possible showed me new depths in his character and our partnership. "You know what I realized through all this?" he said to me one night as we watched Lily and Noah playing in the backyard, their laughter carrying through the open window. "We're breaking a cycle. What you did wasn't just for our kids, it was for their kids someday too." My relationship with James gradually improved as Sophia helped him see the reality of the situation. After witnessing several interactions himself with new awareness, he called me to apologize for dismissing my concerns. The twins asked me why Grandma and Grandpa used to treat Lily and Noah differently. He admitted, "Kids really do notice everything. I should have listened to you sooner." Things with Amber remain strained. She views my confrontation with our parents as an attack on the family hierarchy and her position within it. We maintain civil contact for the children's sake, but the closeness we once shared has not been restored. I hope that time may eventually heal this rift, but I've accepted that some relationships may be permanently altered by my decision to speak up. Lily and Noah have blossomed as the dynamics with their grandparents improved. Lily no longer asks why her grandparents don't love her as much as her cousins. Instead, she excitedly tells me about Grandma teaching her to make the family sugar cookies, a tradition previously shared only with Harper. Noah has regained his natural exuberance around my parents, eagerly showing my father his latest dinosaur facts and space drawings. The change didn't happen overnight. There were setbacks and moments of doubt. Old patterns occasionally re-emerge, requiring gentle but firm redirection. Perfect resolution isn't necessary for healing to begin, and I've learned to celebrate progress rather than expecting perfection. The most profound lesson I've taken from this painful journey is about the nature of family love. True love sees each child for who they uniquely are, rather than measuring them against others or arbitrary standards. It's about connection rather than comparison, acceptance rather than expectation. I've also learned that equality doesn't mean sameness. My children don't need identical experiences to their cousins. What they need is to be valued equally, to know their place in the family is secure, regardless of their personalities or achievements. I made a promise to myself through this process that I would break this cycle completely with my own children and any grandchildren I might someday have. I will celebrate their differences rather than comparing them. I will love them for who they are, not for how well they meet my expectations or reflect back on me. Families are not perfect institutions, but works in progress, capable of both causing deep wounds and facilitating profound healing. By facing our family's painful dynamics openly, rather than pretending they didn't exist, we created space for authentic change and growth. The journey continues with progress and occasional setbacks, but we move forward with greater awareness and intention. And in that intentional movement toward healthier relationships lies hope, not just for our family now, but for generations to come. Has your family ever struggled with favoritism? How did you handle it? Share your experiences in the comments below. And if this story resonated with you, please like and subscribe for more stories about navigating family challenges with courage and compassion. Thank you for listening to my journey. And remember, speaking up for those you love is always worth the discomfort it may cause.